Hey there! Today we're going to talk about this ink, Pelikan Königsblau, aka Royal Blue. This ink was donated by Philip, Alaf Kölle. If that doesn't make any sense to you, then, well, you're not a European. West European from our area, pretty much. Well, anyway, this is an interesting ink. Royal Blue definitely has its place among inks, I think, because it's a neutral color and yet it's rich. That goes for this ink. It's well behaved. It seems to work well. I've used it in a couple of pens, mainly Pelikan M1000. I just wanted to put a Pelikan ink in a Pelikan pen. Beautiful combination, works very well. It's neutral. This is not a flashy color. This is not going to make you go, wow, this is wonderful. I mean, it is blue, and some people really love that, and some think it's boring. But this is the type of neutral color that you could use at work, and it would work just fine. You know, no one would be angry for using really flashy colors. And you know what? That's pretty much all there's to it. So I think that's enough talk. I think we need to check the ink. Oh, by the way, these are 30 milliliter bottles, should you wonder. They look a bit small, but it's 30 milliliters, and they're useful bottles. Right next, you can actually put your pen in. Seems to work fairly well. That's all there's to it. So let's check out what this ink is all about. And I'll see you later. Bye bye. Alright, so here we go with how about that? A flex pen that works. Pelikan. Never say something works. Königsblau, aka Royal Blue. Königsblau. Alright, let's start with a bit of fine writing. The fox jumped over the royal king. I suppose if he's a king, he's sort of royal by nature, isn't he? Well, maybe it's a very fat king. It's just a very royal lot of king. Then we do some medium writing. The fox jumped over the royal king. And then, of course, we should do a little bit of broad writing. So far, I'm very happy with this ink. It performs well. It's not the first time I've used it. I've been using it mainly in my Pelikan M1000. And that's a wonderful combination. Really nice flow. Works very well. Alright, and then we have some italic nibbage. Alright, and then we do a bit of flex writing. Whoops. Paper, come back, there we go. Alright, flex writing. I really shouldn't have said that. But that's that's okay. I'm putting a lot of strain on the feed here, of course, by flexing and writing in a fairly high speed. It's very interesting how these Inkcyclopedia entries seem to ruin any type of flexy writing. For some reason, I don't know what happens. Maybe it's the very smooth Rhodia paper that the nibs just have some trouble grabbing onto. Okay, this ends here. I'm going to spend an hour trying to make this right. So in general, I would say very good flow. It works very well. You saw that with the fine, medium, broad, italic. No startup issues. I inked up the pens yesterday night. I've left them for a night, haven't touched them, haven't tried them out this morning. They write as soon as you make them hit the paper. So I think it's a very good quality. You see that the blue varies from very light in a non-saturated fine nib to quite dark in a very saturated flex nib if it writes. But in normal range nibs, say a broad or this italic, see it's a fairly dark blue. You also see some shading, right? It goes from a lighter blue to a darker blue. It's not excessive, but there is some shading going on. And right now I think we should do a couple of passes, see how we get along there. Interesting. What on earth was going on there? Was there ink in the nib? I can't imagine. This was cleaned very well. Interesting, interesting. Well, we'll see that later. As you can see, the ink dries fairly quickly. It's a fairly fast drying ink, which I enjoy. Let's go for the second pass, see what happens there. Alright. I made a second pass there, didn't I? Sometimes I marvel at my own stupidity. Okay. Disregard that one. Alright. I think we can start to prepare ourselves for some testing. Let's first do some fat writing with this 6mm nib. There's a B. Is it? Yes. Here we will do some medium writing. Before I forget, I'll do a third pass, only in this side. There we go. Well, that's dry now. Interesting. I think we can start to work with the bastard brush. Now there's a nice artistic effect, isn't it? Sort of wipes out all the writing. This is still a bit wet, but let's have a look at the three passes, so forget about that one. This goes, as I said, from a fairly light, non-saturated blue to a very dark blue. That's really like night sky blue, if there is such a word, cerulean, but I suppose that's a bit lighter. I like this ink, and you see some interesting shading there. I'm not sure how well the camera picks it up, but it goes from a very dark, almost black tint there to a lighter blue right there. As I said, the ink performs well. We got a bit of an issue with that flex nib, but sometimes I have the feeling, I'm not sure whether that's your experience too, but some inks are a bit, maybe very wet or something. They feel thin, and this is one of those inks, and I've always got the feeling that those inks don't work too well with a flex nib. But maybe that's just some lunatic talking, I don't know. For now, I think that this is pretty much dry. I think we can start to have some fun or cry over the eyedropper of death. And we'll see what that does. While we are awaiting that, I think we may as well have a look at the brown benchmark. Now there's a serious benchmark. And what I'm doing right now is dipping my finger in some water so that I can actually get off the worst bit of ink. Alright, having said that, I think we should do what everyone has been waiting for, the Tardive test. See that again, it's its liquidity that makes it very hard to get ink on there. Anyway, the Tardive test. I think we need to get rid of some water there. And we can start to work on a scorecard. And that's what we're doing right now. While this is drying, then we'll return to that. And we shall have us a ball. Cleaning. This ink gets full marks on cleaning. I've never had any issues with it. It cleans out easily. As you can see, it's not the most water resistant of inks. It's not the worst either, but it's something that, I mean, ink is completely dissolved there, for example. So it shouldn't be too hard to get out of your pens. Bleed through, that is something we'll have to assess later on. We have the color. Well, that is definitely a blue. We have shading. Shading, well, I'm going to give that a somewhat middle score. It's not terrible. There is some shading going on. It's not the best either, but it's definitely, I mean, there are inks that don't shade at all. Flow, I would say that is very good. I'm going to give that full marks. There was that issue with the flex pen, but I mean, for normal, regular pens, I would say it's not an issue. It always works well. No hard starts, etc. Feathering seems to be very little, but we'll try that on some cheap copy of paper in a second. We have a drying time, which I would say is very good. It dries fast. And then we have waterproofness. Well, I wouldn't call that a 1. You can still read the writing there. Parts of this are just gone. I'm going to give that score of 2, some sort of middle thing. Alright, that was off screen, wasn't it? I'm terribly sorry. Right, so we'll switch to copier paper. And we start with some fine writing, and I'm going to be very interested in seeing whether this pen writes at all now. Happiness abound. Medium nib. Broad nib. Italic nib. And the moment I'm really looking forward to, flexi writing. You can do this. You know you want to flex. That's right. Yay. Thou walkest through. There we go. There we go. Just gives up. Very strange. That's right. That's a free brown benchmark. Oh, that was right. Alright. This gets more fun every week I do this. Walk us through the valley of the shadow of shade. That's what I was going to write. Oh, this thing writes like a very happy pen now. One thing I noticed though, more railroading. What's with these pens and inks? Amazing. Maybe I should start using a vintage pen for this. At least those things always write. Anyway, we have as an idea. Now I just want to do some really fat writing. There's even ink on my little sliding shield. Bloody hell. You all know Rorschach, right? He was from the Rorschach test. You know those ink blots that you have to interpret to see, sort of assess a person's mental state. The guy who developed that, Rorschach, actually had a nickname when he was younger, which was Klecks, which is German for an ink blot. I always think that's funny. Then again, I'm kind of weird, so maybe that explains a lot. So what do we see here? Fine, medium, broad, italic, everything goes well. I don't see anything untoward. Huge brown benchmark. And then of course there is this flexi writing with excessive feathering. You see that? It's really terrible. Then we have a 6mm nib which hardly feathers at all. So there's something with the flex writing, this really wet writing that evokes that, which makes a lot of sense, but I mean, it's really visible. When it comes to bleed through, you see it's bled through, it's this wet ink right there. Well, clearly the brown benchmark bled through a bit, the flex writing bled through like crazy. 6mm nib a little bit, regular writing I would say there isn't so much bleed through. A little bit, you see a little bit of it there with the broad nib. Maybe a little bit, yeah, that's broad nib too, and then the italic nib starts there, which seems to be fine. It's mainly with the broad nib, a little bit there, medium nib with quite some pressure. But in general, I would say this looks pretty good. I mean, if you would use normal pens, normal writing, you could write on a sheet of paper like this, and there should not be any issue. The issues start when you start to do fancy stuff like flex, and I mean, I'm assuming you wouldn't do flex on a sheet of copier paper a whole lot anyway. Rhodia paper, there is no bleed through apart from the brown benchmark, and a little bit there, which is again the flex writing. So, bleed through pen, I'm going to give bleed through a score of 2 here, because it seems to be good unless you start to do excessive stuff. Feathering is a 2 as well. I mean, you could argue that it's a 1 because with normal pens it doesn't feather, but I mean with the flex nib it's excessive, so I do think it is somewhat feather prone ink. Alright, that means we have an inkage factor of 1, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 11. And finally, I would like to do a comparison with another ink. So, please write. Here we have Pelikan, 2 L's. What is going on there? Pelikan, Königsblau. This is it. Of course, now it works. No problem with flexing. And as soon as I say that, you saw that railroading? This pen is screwing with me, that's what it is. Alright, now I've got to make this right, which is always an issue. It seems to write now. Yes, alright, very good. What we have here is it just, I put it on a sheet of paper, it writes, I put it here, it doesn't write. What the hell? There is really some weird hex stuff going on here. I mean, this is Mont Blanc Royal Blue, so that is Mont Blanc's Königsblau. And I think you'll see some things in common, except that the Mont Blanc ink is a bit darker. This is a very dark blue. I picked this mainly for the name, to show off not so much an identical ink, but an ink that is also royal blue, and that is quite different, as you can see. I mean, this is definitely darker. If you were to ask me which do you personally prefer, I love the Pelikan Königsblau, but I like the royal blue from Mont Blanc just a little bit more. I think this is a really nice, intense blue, and you know, I use the Pelikan Königsblau probably just as much, but my personal preference would be this. I think that's a very nice, intense blue. And you know what? That's all there's to it. So I'm hoping you survived my interesting flex nib adventures. I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.